Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Until Saturday. This is our Sunday Sound Off edition. I'm Ari Wasserman, joined by David Ubben and the great Scott Dochterman. It is kind of a little bit of a lull in the season because we're heading into bowls now, and there isn't a jam-packed Saturday to talk about, but I think we have a hell of a show tonight, guys. We're going to be laying out a 24-team playoff and what that would look like in this year's field, and of course, discussing the inevitability of that probably happening one day. The latest on Iowa's offensive coordinator search, P-Gate. That's right, P-Gate. And we're going to get to your voicemails for Sunday Sound Off. Be sure to follow the podcast on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts, and please help support the show by dropping a 5-star review. If you're watching live with us here now, we certainly appreciate you. It means you're probably subscribed to the Until Saturday YouTube feed. If you're not, be sure to do so. And if you're listening to this in podcast form, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel where you can catch us live with shorts and breaking news and all that stuff when we go onto the channel as well. Both the link to the podcast feed and the YouTube channel can be found in both shows' descriptions. And leave us a voicemail for future Sunday Sound Off episodes, 316-462-9852. Again, that is 316-462-9852. And also be sure to sign up for the Until Saturday newsletter where you get your daily fill of college football news delivered directly to your email inbox. All the links can be found in both shows' descriptions. And one other thing that I didn't say that we're going to be talking about, I think it's a big chunk of the show, is Syracuse, Fran Brown, Kyle McCord, and a new era of Syracuse football. So why don't we start there, guys? First of all, Scott, how are we doing today?
We've lost Scott.
Man, I'm doing great. It's perfect. We're in the holiday season, and now we're just kind of in this wild little period here. So,
do you have any weird Christmas meals that you like, or like, what's your favorite Christmas dish?
You know what? I'm going to stay away from cottage cheese. That's only a Thanksgiving tradition here in Iowa. So, but I guess, I like turkey. I like ham. I like just about everything else.
Okay,
but,
so normal stuff.
No cottage cheese for Christmas. There are.
Dave, how are we doing today?
Pretty good. I was worried he was going to hit us with I like a nice cold glass of turkey broth or something along those lines. I was worried. I was waiting for it. But
you've taught me one lesson, Dave, as the host of the show, is that if you have people on that have weird dietary things going on, the only way you can find out more is if you just blatantly ask. So
all my food stuff is normal, though. This is the thing. I've defended all of those things.
You know what they say about crazy people is that they don't know they're crazy. So that's
some
part
say
of
they're just before their time, innovators that aren't appreciated until they're long gone. And one day, Ari, the people will understand. And there will be nuts in ovens across our great nation.
I think that you will be long gone before I come around on some of the things that you do, but I'm happy you're here for the meantime. Why don't we get directly into Syracuse? Syracuse hired Fran Brown recently. In doing so, they flipped, as of Sunday morning, 3 top 500 players into their class from other surrounding programs, while also landing a former 5-star quarterback and Ohio State starting quarterback Kyle McCord in the portal. Can Fran Brown make Syracuse a dangerous program?
Well, there's no one that's there's not a huge roadblock in the ACC, right? I mean, where Syracuse has been, if you can get to the point where you have enough talent to win 7 to 9 games annually, we'd have to look back at the history of the program, but that's probably significantly better than we have seen Syracuse at their best and sustaining that, right? That's always been the most difficult part. You're in upstate New York, not exactly a college football hotbed, but there are some resources there. They do want to win, but this isn't the old Big East anymore. It's a tougher league, but you look around the ACC, Clemson is good, but not a juggernaut. Florida State is trending in all the right directions. But beyond them, is there anyone that if Syracuse finished ahead of them in the ACC standings, we'd feel like the world was tilting on its axis? Probably not. But at the end of the day, Ari, college football is a simple game. Acquire talent, develop talent, and have schemes that utilize that. And the hardest part is acquiring, and Syracuse is on the right road there.
The thing I'll say about Syracuse, and I'm going to kick it over to Scott here in a second, but we did at The Athletic a few series a few years ago doing like just top 5 rankings of a certain topic. And one of those topics was top 5 programs with the most inherent challenges to building. Geographical, weather, access to talent, name recognition, all those things. And Syracuse made the top of that list. And when you go out and you hire somebody who has a background in the Northeast, who has a background coaching in Georgia, who comes in and speaks about recruiting the way that people who get it speak about, it kind of gives you that tingling sensation of like, okay, well, they've got somebody who can connect to players, who knows how to recruit the right way, and actually gets it on a level that, most big time coaches get it. You get excited. I got excited. It makes you want to buy Syracuse stock. But even after what he has done in recruiting in a very short amount of time, even after going out and getting Kyle McCord, the question has to be asked, is Syracuse a place that can overcome its geographical situation and be good, be a good program? I don't know. Scott, what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I think Syracuse has a lot of challenges, no question. I mean, you look at location, how the proximity to good players, and can they compete with Northeastern players, even into Pennsylvania? That's questionable because the best ones go to Penn State or they go to Ohio State or a national recruiting power. So are they going to be able to develop those recruits from the Northeast and turn them into a quality team? And that's really Fran Brown's charge. If he can do that, then this team can be near the top of the ACC on a somewhat consistent basis. But I think that really comes down to, Kyle McCord. I think getting him, could really jumpstart this program, because it's been, every now and then they've kind of getting up to the 8-9 win range under Dino Babers, and then they've fallen off. And now I think under Fran Brown, getting an Ohio State quarterback that a lot of people sought, I think it really has an opportunity to put them in the upper middle of the ACC. And then if he can show kind of his developmental prowess, I think they got a chance to take the next step and eventually propel themselves into being a contender in the ACC.
And I think it's Ari. Can we have a black coaches conversation here briefly? Can we
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
2 things. One, I respect that Fran Brown is being about it. He's not talking about it. He's hired a lot of really young and up and coming black coaches that he believes in. And, I think Elijah Robinson tops that list. I think Nick Williams is also on that list over from Colorado. But here's the thing that I think these coaches are going to be out to prove, which I think every black coach, right or wrong, deals with, is when you hire black coaches, especially young black coaches, there's a lot of conversation of, oh, he can relate to these kids. He's a good recruiter. There's not a lot of conversation about their X's and O's ability or their developmental ability. It's all, well, the kid, he just gets the kids and he can come in. Listen, this is going to be a coaching staff that is very black. And if they can succeed and develop and have really good schemes like it looks like they can have, you can dispel some of these notions. And this is how you do it, because there's not going to be a lot of other coaches on that staff that people are looking around saying, well, who else is going to get the credit for this? Because a lot of times people look to give credit to other coaches, and that's not what you're going to see at Syracuse. And I think it's an opportunity for a lot of those guys. And I think I can tell you, a lot of black coaches around the sport are going to be looking at Syracuse and really rooting for them to succeed, because Fran Brown got an opportunity and he said, I'm going to give a lot of guys who deserve opportunities that don't get them. I'm giving those guys opportunities. I'm not going to complain about the lack of opportunities, which is real. But when you get that chance, give those opportunities out. And we're seeing Fran Brown do that.
Well, the thing I think is interesting too, as you go into that black coaches discussion, is, the building process at Syracuse too, and another very prominent black coach who is doing it that way in Colorado. And I'm wondering if there's going to be any sort of parallel between the way that you build Syracuse and the way that you build Colorado for the same reasons, right? Like not having proximity to talent, being a coach that is probably going to be very good in the portal, and, building up that roster, because, the X's and O's and all that stuff certainly are going to play a major factor of this. But no matter who the coach is at Syracuse, the number one problem there is getting good enough players. And like, I'm with you on that. And I think it's going to be an interesting thing to dissect, but I want to know what the best plan for Syracuse would be to just get the players into the building, and that to me is, in the New Jersey area, I'm wondering if Rutgers is like, yeah, that's probably not the person that we want to go up against, especially now that they're getting some footing and seeing some development and program growth in their New Jersey recruiting. Like, there's a lot there, so that's a lot to unpack too. Scott, are there anything about Syracuse that I'm forgetting to mention here?
No, I think you've pretty much hit it, the nail on the head here. I think again, I like the idea of, what Fran Brown can bring. And I think, there are, a couple of the best coaches I know at Iowa, for instance, are African-American, one in the developmental stage, and that's Kelvin Bell, their defensive line coach, and two in the strategy phase, and that's LeVar Woods, the special teams coordinator. So I hope that he succeeds, because that will help everybody in the sport. And that would be, a real godsend to the Northeast. But, where they're located is a challenge. But I think Syracuse still dominates enough of Northern New York, and that I think it has a chance to be successful in the long term if he can, build some stability there.
We have to have another conversation that's not about Syracuse for 30 seconds before I hit some other pieces of news. What does it mean for Ryan Day and Ohio State that their quarterback entered the portal and ended up at Syracuse? A person that I know very well from my time back on the beat wrote an interesting story in the Columbus Dispatch. Congratulations, Bill Rabinowitz. Very good story. Kind of had some insight as to what happened there at the end of Kyle McCord's tenure at Ohio State and why this transfer situation happened. He mentioned a little bit about portal quarterbacks and how well they've done in the NIL era at Ohio State, and that he wasn't necessarily making as much. I can't imagine that Syracuse is going to be in a position to pay him any more than he was making at Ohio State, even if it wasn't as much as CJ Stroud and Justin Fields and all those guys. Justin Fields was pre-NIL. You get what I'm saying. But the idea that their quarterback, even though he wasn't what Ohio State needed, didn't really land at a place that's prominent in the Power Five makes you wonder, like, did Ohio State overachieve this year with that quarterback? Or, how does your mind spin on that one?
Well, I believe I've been hitting on this all season, Ari, because I watched Ohio State play and I said, hey, this is a team that is not great at quarterback. I don't see it. With these quarterbacks, especially 5 stars, you see some level of progression or you see flashes of it. And we didn't see that with Kyle McCord, right? He had one drive against Notre Dame, but like, how many throws in that drive really impressed you? It kind of felt like it was sort of
there was one throw on that drive that was like a big time NFL throw.
Yeah, but it was a lot of walking.
I was like, holy crap.
Yeah, but it's a lot of tightrope walking. Am I wrong? And I think, especially with the amount that they had around him, an okay offensive line, one of the best 1-2 punches, maybe 1-2-3 punches at running back we've seen in the sport. Well, I say we've seen in the sport this year. And then, along with Washington, I mean, you had 2 NFL receivers on your team, and you have another couple 5 stars. It wasn't good enough. Now, my question is, in the portal era, is this just where we're at? Or in the NIL era, that if you are a 5-star and you don't get it done, I don't know that you could use the term processed here. I don't think it's quite that cut and dry, but like, it's sort of odd, right? And I think that if you don't feel welcome, even if you come back and you feel like they're just going to recruit over you, is it a one and done shot? Whereas in the non-portal era, where it's harder to turn your roster, harder to get a new quarterback in there, you're sort of left with, hey, we've got to invest everything we have into this guy, because I don't think it's going to be the Devin Brown show. I mean, Ari, is Ohio State's starting quarterback in 2024 currently on its roster?
I mean, it kind of seems like it right now. I mean, I don't know which players are still yet to go into the portal that would be an option here. I thought there would be a chance, just completely speculation-wise, but I thought maybe they might make a run at Malik Murphy, and that doesn't seem to be happening. Who else is even left at this point? They're out of the picture, it looks like, with Cam Ward. I mean, who are you waiting for?
You never know.
I guess if the right person jumps in, but I don't even know who that would be at this point. So they have Aaron Noland coming in, who is a 5-star freshman who a lot of people compare to CJ Stroud. They have Devin Brown, who I think we're going to see a ton of in the Cotton Bowl, and Lincoln Kienholz, who was a middle tier prospect who seems to have a bright future. So, the thing that I think is interesting is that Ohio State built its entire program around being the place that develops quarterbacks at a high level. Because every quarterback that Ryan Day coached at Ohio State was a Heisman finalist and a first-round draft pick. And then you go to a person who wasn't great, and all of a sudden it feels like the world's on fire, and now Ohio State doesn't have a quarterback on the radar here that's going to be able to live up to that sort of thing. So, coming off of a game like the Michigan game where the quarterback threw 2 picks, one in the first quarter and one to end the game, that's just not a really great feeling for Ohio State because, no matter what was going wrong at this program for the last 3 or 4 years, you always could feel good about who was playing quarterback there, and that's just certainly not the case right now. So it'll be interesting to see how they maneuver that. I'm excited. I'm covering the Cotton Bowl. I can't wait to see how it goes. And we'll see how it goes. But it's just kind of an interesting dynamic here. And also, too, if a quarterback doesn't feel like they're being paid enough in the portal, in the portal era at their place, is it possible that they might search elsewhere all the time? Is another topic probably for the offseason. So, okay. A few other things. KJ Jefferson's in the portal.
A lot of South Carolina
committed to Sam Pittman, Arkansas. I know somebody said KJ Jefferson in the chat as it pertains to Ohio State. I think it seems very clear that he's going to be going to South Carolina. Trey Benson, the terrific running back for Florida State, has entered the NFL draft. 1,132 total yards and 15 total touchdowns this season. Number 4 here on the list of news that we have to talk about. Ole Miss is just rolling in the portal right now. They landed Juice Wells today, number 1 transfer portal rank. And Max and Sam will be taking a closer look at the portal winners and losers and most impactful transfers on Tuesday's podcast. But is Ole Miss coming into next year as just like a badass team that could win the SEC? Could you get to that point already to think that hey, they're going from are we in an era where a solid team that wins 9 or 10 games can portal the hell out of teams, look at the schedule, see a soft spot, and just go look at, this is the year we're going to make a run, pony up, 1-year rentals. We're going to go get these guys in. This is our year. Is that a thing that can happen? Or is happening?
It seems like that's where we're heading. It seems like that's what's happening right now. I mean, you look at it, they're sniffing around Walter Nolan. That'd be an interesting addition as well.
And apparently that visit went well.
Yeah, but you got Tyler Barron, a guy who's been really productive at Tennessee. Key Lawrence, a kid who's been around to a couple schools, but a really high-level recruit coming from Oklahoma as well. Tamarian McDonald. You throw in Princely Uman-Milan? Excuse me.
I think that's right.
From Florida. I believe that's right. And then, obviously you had Juice Wells. I mean, you have a lot of high-impact transfers. And you are going to go – I mean, it seems like you're going all in here. And whatever this costs, I'd be interested to see if we ever get some information on okay, how are you handling the finances behind it? Because I don't know that there's a lot of schools, and Ole Miss for a long time was kind of behind on an NIL. And if you've got enough money that you're going to push a bunch more in, that's not typical to year one because Ole Miss has a pretty favorable schedule next year. It's an interesting strategy. And is it one that you can see pay off or other schools try if they're in a situation where, you've got Judkins coming back, you got Dart coming back. Okay, let's go get a bunch of defensive guys. You add Juice Wells, another weapon there. We haven't really seen a team do this, right? Because we haven't had NIL in the portal era in this way. But this is a really fascinating strategy.
It just reminds me of a professional team.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Getting up to the trade deadline and their team looking really, really good, better than expected. Yes. They look at the remaining schedule and they go, hey, we have a lot of games on here that they can win. Are we going to put ourselves in a position by overspending at the trade deadline in order to make a run this year? I think that happens a lot in baseball. Scott, do you think that that's something that makes sense to you?
Yeah, I think it does, especially for a place like Ole Miss where, they're targeting some Tennessee defensive backs. I mean, if you're on the fringe, which they are, they're in the New Year's Six, which effectively means that they would be in the playoff next year. If you load up, you've got a chance to host a game win a game, get to the Final Four or something like that. I think that's what you've got to do if you're in that position, because a team like Ole Miss, it's not old blood money like Ohio State or Alabama, where you're going to be able to get 5 stars every single year. But if you can load up for the years where you think you can be competitive, that's what you've got to do. As you said, the trade deadline in baseball, now's the time to hit free agency.
It's like the Rams Super Bowl team a few years back. You add OBJ, you add Von Miller. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if they go out and get like a guy like Walter Nolan, who I believe was a top 5 player nationally in his class 2 years ago.
I think he's number 1.
Was he number 1? Yeah. I mean,
fairly certain.
Seems to have flashed really, really nice film too. It's like that's a huge, huge, huge recruiting win that doesn't necessarily stack up with just adding somebody in the portal. That's like a foundational piece to maybe a multi-year piece for your program. So we'll keep tabs on Ole Miss, but it's certainly interesting to see how teams are starting to use the portal and maybe becoming more aggressive when there is an opening to do something special based on circumstance, returning roster, and future schedules. So, okay, Scott, you ran a story this week on The Athletic, changing gears here now to a 24-team college football playoff. What inspired this thought process, and what did you find as you were working on it?
Yeah, it's something that I've always been interested in. And I think I've covered Division II playoffs 20 years ago and saw it firsthand and how exciting it was. And then over the weekend, I was watching some of the FCS playoffs and some of the other divisions. And I thought, can you imagine what this would be like if there was a FBS 24-team playoff? And it just seems to be, pretty much double the field what we're going to get. But having it at home campuses in the middle of December, and what you would get first week, then second week, and some of these games. And I was really fascinated by how kind of the exercise played out, because what I tried to do was use the CFP selection committee standings, incorporate every champion, for the group of 5 and for the Power 5, and then try to isolate a little bit where you don't have teams from the same conference meeting until at least the regional finals. So a little bit of NCAA basketball tournament, or at least the way it used to be. So when I kind of went through this, I think it ended up about the way I thought it would, which was you've got some interesting first round matchups, because you're going to have those group of 5 teams and some of the middle to lower level playoff contenders. But then when you reach the second round, it's going to be the best weekend we've ever seen in college sports history. It'll make the NCAA tournament's first round look like, just a shrug. It's unbelievable when you start to get into that, matchups like, Ole Miss at Ohio State or Mizzou at Oregon. But then also you get a little bit deeper and you get, Oklahoma at Florida State. You get Notre Dame at Alabama. And then it goes from there, and those would be on home campuses.
This is a kind of a difficult thing if you're listening to it to visualize. So in this bracket, just so you can try to follow me here, there are 4 different regions. In those 4 regions, there are 6 teams. 6 times 4 equals 24. I did really well in high school math. And then there are 2 bye teams in each region. So here's the first region, and I know it's tough, but try to visualize it. The byes would be 1 and 2, Michigan and Oregon. Then you would have Oregon State at LSU. And I love that we have TV time here, 8 p.m. on ESPN ABC. Then you would have SMU at Mizzou. That would be region 1. And then, of course, the winners of those games would go on to play Michigan or Oregon. In that region, guys, do you think – and let me just say this before we continue to go on. I saw a stat on Twitter. I don't know if you guys saw this, but the FCS playoffs had a really fun game on Friday night. Apparently, a lot of people were watching it.
Saturday night, Ari.
It was Saturday night.
Those of us who appreciate the non-Ohio State, non-Alabama, basically non-Group A enthusiasts appreciated the Montana, North Dakota State insanity.
But I read a stat, though, that was funny, that the only teams that have won the national championship Like, well, except for 1 year in the entire history of this bracket was a 1 or a 2 seed. Like, there are no Cinderellas in FCF football. Like, you don't have like a 9 seed winning the national championship. And I think
get in there though. Albany got
I don't know. I don't know where I read it.
State.
I wish I would have remembered where I read it. But apparently there's been like very little parity in the later rounds. And like the best teams in the country. And Scott, you said you covered it. Maybe you have some insight on this.
Yeah. And that was one of the examples I used to where there can be a Cinderella story. And that was in 2005. So 18 years ago, man, I'm getting old. I was living in Northwest Missouri, and I was along with our beat writer covering Northwest Missouri State's run. They were the last seed to get in the tournament. Now they are a powerhouse program and lost a couple of games that year, but they were playing Grand Valley State from Michigan, where Brian Kelly had just left a couple of years before it, and Chuck Martin was the coach, who's at Miami of Ohio. And they were the last team to get in, and Grand Valley State was the first team to get in. And they made it all the way to the championship finals. And it came down to the very end where a guy dropped a touchdown pass, and ultimately Grand Valley State won. So there is an opportunity for that. But I think what we'd also look at is the Cinderella stories are going to be comparable to what we see in the NCAA tournament, which is, let's take in region, we'll stick with region 1 since you put that up there. SMU going to Mizzou and winning. I don't think that's not out of character. That's something that's plausible. But then SMU going to Michigan the next week is something you're going, no, that's not going to happen. But if it does, or a Troy goes to Washington or something to that effect. In fact, I tried to institute in each round that I showed here was some sort of not crazy upset, but an upset that, because every week there's going to be somebody who's a 5 beats a 4 or something like that. So I think I had Arizona upsetting Texas in the second round in region 3. So, but to suggest that any of these teams are going to win it all, I think is unrealistic, just like it is now, just like it would be with anybody beating, like the group of 5 champion going and winning and beating Alabama, Ohio State, and Ole Miss in 3 straight games or something like that is probably unrealistic in the current environment, whether you're talking about 4 teams like Cincinnati making it a few years ago or 12 teams, which is what we'll have next year.
Well, this is fun to look at because I see it, and having life to Mizzou and LSU are some of the stuff that we're going to get next year in the 12-team playoff. Teams that I think are very good, who if they get hot at the right time could do something. Catherine here, who's an LSU fan, put into the chat, the point of Cinderellas isn't for them to win it all. It's to see how far they can ride the wave. People didn't need St. Pete's to win it all for their run to matter. That's true. I think, in fact, they probably wanted them to lose when they got to a certain point. Because at the end of the day, people want the best teams to play. I think that it's cute in the beginning, and the further they get, the more people aren't rooting for them anymore because, at the end of the road, you want to see the Titans play the Titans. But
and for whatever it's
is
worth,
there anybody in the first region that you think could win?
In the first region, I'm not buying it.
I just want to see if we can get through the 4 regions and see if there's any possibility that a team that isn't a 1 or a 2 seed wins. And I'm already going to push back a little bit. Like, I guess it's within the possibility that LSU could come out of that region if they figured out, their defense a little bit, got healthier. The Heisman Trophy winner is on their team. They're probably athletically able to stack up with the 1 and 2 seeds. They're probably more talented than the 1 and 2.
Well, I mean, I'd be in the NBA if I was 6'4", but these are all big ifs, right?
No, I know, but I'm saying, like, if LSU won that region, it wouldn't be like St. Pete's getting to the Final Four.
No,
I think
correct.
Liberty sneaking out of Region 2 would be, and that's not.
Well, let's do the regions real quick then, so people don't get confused. Region 2, top seed is Washington. Number 2 is Ohio State. Both of those teams get byes. 5 is Liberty playing on the road at Louisville. 6 is Troy at Ole Miss. Let's do Region 3 now. Region 3 is Texas as the number 1 seed, Georgia as the number 2, both of whom getting byes. 5, NC State at number 4, Arizona. Number 6, Miami of Ohio at number 3, Penn State. And then Region 4 would be bye weeks for Alabama, Florida State, then the first round games in that region would be Iowa on the road at Notre Dame, which shoot that game into the sun, and then 6 Boise at number 3 Oklahoma, and all these games can either be found on NBC or Fox or CBS, because damn it if we talk about the expanded playoff without bringing up a television contract.
Got to.
So I look at these regions here, and it's like, okay, Oklahoma could win Region 4 maybe, right? Like Region 3.
Oklahoma, for me, the ones that okay, so if we're talking crazy, I'll give you LSU just as a theoretical exercise. LSU, I'll say Liberty, and I will say Arizona, and I'll say Oklahoma would jump out to me as the 4 that I could see it.
You could see Liberty beating Washington or Ohio State?
It's plausible. It's not the craziest thing in the world.
Scott, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say if there's, I'd probably only put 2 or 3 that have a chance to even win their region, let alone go past their region. And I think LSU makes sense because LSU has incredible athletes, has the best player in the country. So it gets hot. It's a close game. They can do things that a team like Iowa, for instance, couldn't. Iowa plays great defense, doesn't do anything on offense, so it would struggle in those types of situations. I think Oklahoma would be possible, but not as likely. I think Penn State would have some potential because they did play 2 outstanding teams and lost. And Arizona might be the other one. I kind of like the way Arizona finished the season. But
I'd like to see Arizona,
but the rest of them.
game.
But again, this is kind of what the NCAA tournament brings.
See, here's the thing that is crazy.
Arizona playing Texas.
That would be fun. I look at this and I think this would be freaking awesome because you have these little mini pods, and you've got 6 teams in these mini pods, and then whoever wins their mini pod gets to the Final Four. You guys know how brackets work. I don't know why I had to explain it. I feel like this could not and cannot happen. It would be awful if it happened, right? Am I nuts?
I wouldn't love it. I mean, Ari, I'm an 18 playoff guy. I don't love the 12. I think the 12 is better than the 4, but if it were up to me, I'd go 8. If you do this, then I think we're having a fair conversation about what the regular season is.
Yeah, and this is all hypothetical. We don't have to go down that road, but it's just I'm trying to think of in a world where we got this, what would we pay for it? I think it's an interesting thought process, which brings us to the next discussion point here. And I think there's a lot of games that we'd be excited about. Is there an individual matchup before we move on that you guys would see in this hypothetical bracket and be like, God, I think that Arizona, Texas would be the number 1 game I would have. And it's because I'm a homer.
Well, I feel like I'd like to see, if we could find a way to get Washington and Texas to play each other, and then Michigan and Alabama to play each other. I don't know if we could find a way to do that, but I feel like if that could happen, I'd love to see those games. I know this is a theoretical exercise, but just imagine
you would just love to see the games that the 4-team field gave us. Yeah, I agree with you. Hey, Scott, my favorite thing about your thing here is that Region 3's bye week is Georgia. And Region 4 is Alabama's got a bye week, and we would just get to see that game again. It doesn't matter how many teams you expand, the route to what we already have is the finish line to these sort of things. But is there a game in there, Scott, that you would be like, okay, this give me more of this? Okay, so Iowa beats it'd be Iowa, Florida State, maybe?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I think it'd be Iowa, Alabama, and then the dream would be over. But I think the what I would have it is 1 versus 4 and 2 versus 3. Kind of bracketed that way. I guess Notre Dame and Alabama. I mean, here's the thing: you start looking at these games on campus. Notre Dame and Alabama, sign me up just because of the helmets, if nothing else. Oklahoma at Florida State, sign me up because of the helmets. Penn State at Georgia. Ole Miss playing in Ohio State. What if it's snowing in Ohio State and Ole Miss has to go there? I mean, Louisville and Washington, that, you got Jeff Brom and the way he likes to play against Michael Penix, who he used to play. And then of course, LSU at Michigan. You've got, those are the matchups that I think people go, wow, okay, sign me up. I definitely want to see that. And I think, and the other part of it is keeping it on campus. This is what I think everybody's going to recognize next year is that the teams that receive buys will look and go, how in the hell did those guys get home games? If you're looking right now and you're saying Georgia and Florida State, they're playing at home in that first round, and why don't we get to do that? We earned it all year. And then you're going to start talking about fans trying to travel. I mean, you're going to travel to 3 destination locations if your team's going to win the national title. I mean, you're talking about maybe your first round, if you're the 4th seed, you might be playing in New Orleans, and then you might be playing in Miami, and then you might be playing in Arlington or LA at SoFi Stadium. I mean, you're asking your fans to travel a lot and spend a ton of money. And I don't know that that's going to be feasible. So my guess is within even 2 years, by the time the 2026 season rolls around, you're going to see some of those schools that have had buys saying, why can't we get at least one game on campus?
Okay, let's go to the next segment here, which is we're connecting off of the previous segment, which is a 24-team playoff a realistic model for the FBS? First off, is there a real future where the playoff expands again? Is the 24-team thing ideal, or even 28 like D2 or 32 like D3 better? Other questions that we have is, would there be on-site games like we're expecting in the 12-team era in this? I think that Scott just answered that question. And a topic of consternation has been off-season December schedule right now, with signing day and soon the 12-team playoff happening all simultaneously. If the schedule is already a headache now, how might programs navigate a 24-team field, and how on earth would television networks juggle this? Do you think that it's going to get to this point, guys?
Yeah, here's the uncomfortable truth, Ari. There's bills coming. There's bills coming for these so-called nonprofits. And whatever it looks like, whether players become employees, whether you put, X amount of money in a trust, which we'll discuss later, there's going to be some level of, whether in reality or in name only, some revenue sharing. And you know what happens when you share, Ari? We both have young children. That means you get a little bit less. So that means, okay, you're either going to spend less on coaches. You're certainly going to spend less on facilities, right? Well, you're probably not going to spend less on coaches, maybe a little bit. But you've got to find alternate revenue sources. And we've written about some of them. Some of them might be in Saudi Arabia, perhaps, sorry. But the one that makes the most sense and that there's a lot of money to be had, you know what that would be, Ari?
Sponsorships?
No, expand the playoffs. More things for you to sell. You had neutral site games. Those are sellable.
Sponsorships was just me hoping that you would say this is impossible, but I guess I didn't get there.
Well, there you go. You have, neutral site games. You pay, you get $5 million, something like that for a game like that. Conference championship games. Everyone knows they're stupid and they're unnecessary. You know why we have them, Ari? Because they make money, and people need to make money
for sponsorships.
Yeah, for sponsorships, right? And so, if you have a playoff, I mean, I forget who it was that was talking recently. Oh, it was when I was at the Sports Business Journal. Intercollegiate forum, they had a private equity guy talking about the involvement, and he basically said the playoff on its own, if it was a standalone business, would be worth $1 billion. Well, what if we doubled it or tripled it? There's a lot of money to be had. So as these bills come due, you're looking around for alternate revenue sources. It's going to be too enticing. Like, listen, I don't want to do it as much as the next person because I think you run the risk of hurting the regular season, but it's coming because bills are coming, and you only have
care about the regular season.
I do, not just the rivalry games, though, Ari. I care when Ohio State and Maryland play.
Scott, do you think this is the end game here, or is it just a fun exercise?
I think it's a fun exercise for today, but I think in the future, all of this is tied together. Realignment is forcing a lot of issues. There's going to be more money out there. There's, when you look at what's going to happen with the ACC with their grant of rights and the Big 12 eventually, and how does that all get woven into this? And that's why I put down, it was kind of fun to try to schedule it out by network, but I added 4 networks because, it'd be kind of insane for ESPN to grab all of it and get down to their 8th crew doing a game on one given weekend. But if you're got, if you make this at least two networks, the Fox family of networks and the ESPN family of networks, I mean, and they're splitting the cost, the amount of money and that's going to the schools will be insane. And as David mentioned, there's going to be some sort of level of revenue sharing. And this is one way to pay for it. And it's probably, along the lines of what the NFL does, which is provide some sort of neighborhood of maybe 55% of all media rights revenue goes to the players. And this is a way to generate more revenue for the athletes. And so do I expect it now? No, I think they're going to continue to dip their toe in the water. You might see a switch to home campuses maybe fairly soon, and then maybe an upgrade to 16 teams, so this might be 2 decades down the road. But I think at some point they're going to have to expand because you also have bowl games and what bowl games bring and don't bring. And I think the more the playoff is important, that's also part of what these teams are shooting for. And to get more teams in the playoff, kind of like the NCAA tournament, it makes or breaks your season. Going to a bowl game is kind of like going to the NIT. The more this expands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm sad, guys.
Nobody's been in charge of college football for a long time, and it legislated itself into a place that is not great.
All right, Scott, yours is the star of the show today. You got all these stories that we're talking about, but now we have to ask you a quick question. Why the hell does Iowa not have an offensive coordinator? This is the next segment. Let's do a quick roll call of noteworthy offensive coordinators that have been hired in this cycle. Andy Kotelnicki at Penn State was the leader of the Jayhawks' 28th nationally ranked total offense and 434 yards per game. Very exciting offensive scheme, and the potential of Penn State seems to be off the charts. Jeff Grimes, KU, the offensive coordinator for Baylor team in 21 that averaged 31 points per game and was a Broyles Award finalist. Jonathan Brewer for Duke coached the 14th ranked SMU offense to 465 yards and 40 points per game. Brian Lindgren at MSU, Michigan State, retained as Jonathan Smith's offensive coordinator from Oregon State with the 32nd ranked offense with 426 yards per game and 33 points per game. And then Colin Klein at Texas A&M did really well at Kansas State. Like, what is happening here as the portal is coming and going? Iowa has had a head start, maybe a 2-year head start, depending on how you want to look at it, to try to get somebody here. Why is this taking so long, and is this coaching malpractice?
No, this is a different type of situation than where you have at the other places. Now, Colin Klein, I think, might have worked at Iowa, but I think when you look at this right now, Iowa is really strapped when it comes to the portal. They are now at officially 86 scholarships going into next year, and so they're waiting on some NFL decisions. But there are a couple of coaches right now under heavy consideration, and one of them is Joe Philbin, who coached at Iowa a million years ago, but was the offensive coordinator for Green Bay, head coach of the Dolphins. And then the other one is Paul Christ, who coached at Wisconsin. And those are two that are probably the most prominent guys under consideration. And I think the thing is with an Iowa versus everybody else, Iowa can fill the vacuum left behind in some ways by Wisconsin by going to an offense that has 90% 11 personnel. If it leans into what makes it successful, or had made it successful when it did average 31 and almost 32 points a game a couple of years ago, which is better run game, and certainly a passing scheme that's not from 1991. And I think that's what either of these coaches can bring to Iowa is a better passing system with better depth, with better route running. And Deacon Hill trying to run Sean Lewis's up-tempo offense is a non-starter. I'm probably better than that.
Well, Scott, I have to ask.
But anyway, it's different. But I think Paul Christ, if he was the hire, would be really good.
About Syracuse,
Mhm.
right, Dave? The two names that you mentioned, and Tony Yayo here, one of our loyal listeners, mentioned it, are old white guys. I don't know
Mhm.
if that's just the only way that this is going to work at Iowa, but is it possible that we're going to find out that Brian Ferentz wasn't the problem next year?
Yes and no. Part of the problem has been execution and lack of the player development. When they were successful a few years ago, they had first round draft picks on the offensive line and tight end, and they actually do have some who are injured now. So I think Brian is very good when it comes to run game coordination and less good when it comes to pass game coordination. And I think having all the injuries they did on offense really stunted any kind of ability for them to get out of that big hole that they were in. And I would say that, to push back a little bit on the theory, I mean, half of their coaches are African-American, some significant ones, as I mentioned. So they have a role in doing this. Now, Joe Philbin and Paul Christ, for instance, I think one thing that they've got to do is work with what Kirk Ferentz wants to do, and that is play complementary football. And it may bore the hell out of some people, but it actually, when this team's winning 10 games, and I know next year it's going to be an open division, but you can't tell me that Washington coming to Iowa City is going to be something that they're going to be able to walk through, because I've seen so many teams come to Iowa City and get their ass kicked that I think that it's just about, can they run the ball effectively? Can they play action pass? Can they move the ball down the field? And if they score 31 points like they did in 2020 or 2018, then this team will be just fine where it is.
They cannot. If they hire Joe Philbin, listen, I just like the guy hadn't coached in college, in an on-field role at least in 20 years, and 1 year as an analyst at Ohio State. Just the college game and the pro game are so different, and especially if you're not going to bring in a new system where you have some new ideas and some new blood. I'm not even sure what they would be running, there. You could say quote unquote pro style. Okay, but the defensive schemes are totally different and the athletes are totally different. I think we hear the term complementary football. When I hear that term, that just means, well, our offense isn't very good, but we can still do some stuff. And it's
Now,
it
Dave,
just seems to me like a faulty way to try and build a program.
You need to watch
Especially when you're not in the
because,
Big Ten West anymore.
All the totals in the NFL on Sunday were in the 30s.
I know.
The Steelers, there's a lot of teams that play like Iowa in the NFL. I think that
there's not a lot in college.
But I do, and Catherine here brought this up, Scott, and it's an interesting thought because I had it myself. When you said, what's Washington going to do when they go into Iowa next year? Probably exactly what Penn State did. If you have top, and maybe not next year's team, but if you bring in a team that has a very good quarterback and top level receivers, you need to do something to answer that, because Iowa's defense is excellent. I think Iowa's defense is also shown when you're playing against a high-powered offense with a ton of very good players on it that there's only so much you can withstand before the dam opens. And I just think that it's if you're going to play this way, then you are basically resigning yourself to saying what they did this year, which was freaking remarkable. I was texting you about it a few weeks ago. All the Iowa jokes aside, the team literally won double-digit games, played in the Big Ten championship game, and came close to even covering that game. They played their asses off in the Big Ten championship game. So, I don't think that Kirk Ferentz is a bad coach by any stretch of the imagination because of just what he was able to do this year, in spite of a problem that I think you could partially, if not solely, blame on him. But I think there was this thought process that Iowa was going to recognize that they could play complementary football while also being open to offensive innovation. I don't think that you have to run 3 tight end sets out of the pro style under center formation in order to play smart football that gets first downs and play complementary football. It doesn't have to be boring 60-year-old man coming up with the plays. I don't know if it's just me, but does that make sense to what I'm saying? Can't they try to do something somewhat new that just gives their athletes a chance to do more in space and maybe acquire better athletes that are excited about running the offense? Or does it just have to be a team that is better at getting first downs, but not necessarily scoring in order to win these games? I don't know. Maybe Iowa only has one way to go here, and that's to try to duplicate what they just did. But is there something else that can be done here, or is it just is what it is?
I'm going to lose my mind.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. It's not going to be they're not going back to the Big Ten championship game ever again if they average 16 plus point, 16 points a game. They know that. They also know that you can't average 250 yards a game and hope to win 10 games again, because that's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. They can play this style of football and be much better on offense. But the thing is, are they going to be able to go out and recruit the athletes in Iowa to be able to execute at a high level? I think they could do what Iowa State does and be effective, but I don't think they could go out and do what TCU did with Max Duggan and be effective. I think it's a matter of how do they leverage what they have, their strengths, play to those strengths. Because, and then, when we start to talk about age, I don't like to be ageist. I think people can execute plans, because I think sometimes people get too fired up over 4 wide receiver sets and 3-3-5 defensive packages, and we're all like cats chasing a laser pointer. It's about winning games. And if you win the game, if you're physical and the other team isn't, you're going to win that game as long as you can execute. And Iowa's problem has been that they've thrown 36 touchdown passes the last 4 years. The 3 previous years, the first 3 under Brian Ferentz, they had a quarterback that was 68. They had players and they were able to run the ball effectively. They haven't been able to do that now because they don't have the linemen they did, and they don't have the quarterback. And now if they have a better passing system, I think they're going to be fine. But, to scrap it, you look at Wisconsin. Now, maybe in the future, that's the move that Iowa should make. But I think right now, I would, if I was offensive coordinator, and how I would do this a little bit differently, I would have a running quarterback. I would have somebody who could run the ball, because Deacon Hill can't. They never really had anybody who can except CJ Beathard, and that still isn't anybody great. So if they can have somebody somewhat innovative that way, more power to you. But I do think that it doesn't need to be completely scrapped. The style. It's more the system that needs to be scrapped.
I'll close with this before we move on. But you talk to really good offensive coaches, you hear 2 things. Every time we touch the ball, we should try to score 7. And every play should be designed to score. Doesn't have to score. You're not taking shots on every play. But like every play, you should have an attempt to score. And you watch Iowa play, and it's almost like I just don't believe they have that mindset. And I think that the thought process and how they view offense, we can argue about the second point, but if you don't believe that every time the offense takes the field, they should be trying to score 7, and that's the only thing that's good enough on that possession, you're not asking enough. You're not dreaming big enough. You're not aiming high enough. This is a problem. And I think Iowa just philosophically, has an issue there. And I think you've got to demand more. And if you're sitting there going, well, if we can just get up to 20 points a game, or if we can just, cut down our 3 and outs, it's just like, how about you try and go score every time you touch the ball? Like that's what the point of offense is. And I think it's philosophically so misaligned. Anyway.
Scott, continuing to hold the banner for our podcast, let's move on to the next segment now, which is how can bowl games remain relevant in the 12-team college football playoff era? The Duke's Mayo Bowl may have the blueprint. This is a story of innovation and change, which is sponsored by Invesco QQQ, the official ETF of the NCAA. Scott wrote the story on The Athletic. Scott, what can you tell us about this story and what their plan is?
Yeah, I think the Duke's Mayo Bowl has done a really good job of understanding, being very self-aware, which I don't know that bowl games have been that way in the past. And that is understanding its place in the world and how do they make it relevant. And there are a couple of ways where they've done that. One is that they've been able to, they have a sponsor and they've leaned into the unique and funness, that's not even a word, but the fun part of college football, which is the Mayo bath. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
The Mayo bath. It's fun. It's a viral moment every year. Yes. I mean, how many times have, I know I've been in press boxes at other bowl games, and all of a sudden somebody says, hey, you got to turn to the Mayo Bowl. They're getting ready for the Mayo Bath. So they've made it a fun endeavor. But I think this year may actually be another step that all bowl games need to get into, and that is an NIL marketplace, because it allows the players coming to town to have the ability to generate their own revenue while they're there. And like, for instance, there it's great for both teams. You've got North Carolina, which is obviously a home site, and so they can do commercials, link up with businesses that way. You have West Virginia. I mean, if you have a senior finance major who understands, well, NFL is probably not going to be my bag, but he comes to Charlotte, North Carolina, where there's a bunch of Fortune 500 companies, you might be able to link up and have some, whether it's internship ideas or potential job opportunities. I think that's what bowl games have to be, is make it fun. The game is part of it, but just like on Saturdays, everybody wants their team to win, but that's not realistic. It's about the event. It's about people tailgating. It's about having a good time. And I think that's the same way with the bowls, that it's not just, hey, come to this game. So the players, even the ones on the border, are going, well, maybe I should opt out and get ready for the NFL. Well, if you have the opportunity to make a couple $1,000s while you're there, and watch your coach get lathered up in mayonnaise, I think even though that may be disgusting, it's still a lot of fun. So that's what I think this is a really good idea, that, not everybody's going to have mayonnaise, but I think you could have different things, a dunk tape or tank or something, going forward.
Dave's whole thing is edible mascots now, right? Like that's your
I love
your
it.
thing.
The Pop-Tarts Bowl, speaking of
do they know how they're doing it though? Is it going to be a Pop-Tart
They've kept the details very under wraps. They won't even tell you the flavor of sin.
I just want to know if it is a person wearing something that's edible, or if the mascot is a huge Pop-Tart that is just not moving.
It's unclear, and I'm going to tune in to find out.
Because sweating, disgusting person wearing this Pop-Tart that bakes in the sun and people take a bite out of the human.
Well, now hang on now. Now the Pop-Tarts Bowl does have a normal mascot, and then after the game, there will be an unsheathing, I assume, with a large sort of thin foil wrapper, a la traditional Pop-Tarts. The Pop-Tart will be unsheathed. I assume in that moment its flavor. I assume in that moment the flavor will be revealed. I believe in my heart of hearts that it will be a frosted strawberry. I will accept brown sugar cinnamon, but frosted strawberry is certainly the iconic flavor. But the edible mascot will not have been run around all day. It will only appear after. Whether or not there is a person inside, I think has been purposefully kept vague, and I cannot wait to find out the answer to this question. My guess is yes.
It should be a Pop-Tart that's the size of an end zone. And I don't know if the main Pop-Tart discussion here is that you think that strawberry or frosted strawberry is like the iconic flavor.
Yes.
But isn't the one that I always grew up eating was the cinnamon one? Which one's that?
It's the brown sugar cinnamon. I would say brown sugar cinnamon is a top 3. I think frosted blueberry is in the mix. The chat, Catherine B, has noted that some parents did not allow the unfrosted strawberry, or did not allow the frosted strawberry, kept with the frosted. Fortunately, my parents loved me, so they allowed me to have frosting on my Pop-Tart. My question for both of you, Ari and Scott, is would you eat the edible mascot, the edible Pop-Tart?
If it was unsheathed, absolutely. I honestly couldn't tell you the last time I actually took a bite out of a Pop-Tart anyway. When's the last, I graduated from middle school and that was the end of my Pop-Tart era. I don't know. Is this something that you ate in college?
Well, I've had a few in the last few years. I will say, respectfully, I upped my game, and the Boston cream pie toaster strudels are unbelievable.
We're going to be a toaster strudel guy.
Listen, if you want a real wreck, the Boston
he puts his toaster strudels in the oven, everyone.
No, I put them in the air fryer because here's the issue with the toaster strudel, okay? If you put them in the toaster, the inside stays frozen, and they get way, way too burnt on the outside. but the Boston cream pie toaster strudel, you put that thing in the air fryer, it gets the inside really hot, gets the nice outside a little bit crispy, but not too crispy. Then you slather on the little chocolate sauce, and it's unbelievable. So anyway, Scott, would you eat the edible mascot?
Yeah, go ahead, Scott. Answer if you'd eat the edible mascot.
Mascot.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I am a Pop-Tart connoisseur.
Oh, you are?
Yes,
okay.
I would eat the edible mascot. Oh, yeah.
Are you still
I would
eating
eat the
these?
mascot, even if it's...
In like your adult life?
Yeah, sadly. Well, yeah, I mean, my kids grew up and they were easy breakfast items. So, unfortunately, they were there a lot of times and I shouldn't have eaten them. But I did talk to Steve Hogan with the Citrus Bowl Sports about this. And he was hoping that whatever, was the live mascot that will be in it, and it wasn't going to be it wouldn't be living. But that might be the case. I can't wait to see it while I'm down there. And but yes, if it was unsheathed, I would love it. If it, and if it was sheathed, I'd wait for it. As long as it was a blueberry, get out of my face. But
I'm going to
strawberry,
give you
frosted strawberry. You bet.
I'm going to give you one quick Pop-Tart hot take. And I want to ask you one more question about your story. The s'mores flavor was elite and the best one. Okay. Scott, in your story, the Duke's Mayo president, Joe Tusa, said the company's communication staff spoke openly about leaning into info, if not celebrating, the quirky and weirdness of the sport. Do you think that the bowl game's relevance is vastly improved as a result of this? I know people tune in. I know you said that. But what is it about the Mayo Bowl that makes people want to watch the game more?
A couple of things would be, one, you've got to have decent teams. You've got to have teams that people care about. And I think North Carolina, West Virginia is a good bowl game. I mean, is it a great one? Well, that's probably not. But I mean, there are teams that people know about. But I think the quirkiness part of it, the end of it, is what people tune into. But it's also like, oh, well, there's a couple of decent teams, and they've had close to 3 million viewers the last couple of years, and their impressions have been off the charts. I mean, I think it was 35 million impressions that they've had because of the bowl, because of the Mayo dump. So that's where I think, let's take that versus the Sun Bowl or the Liberty Bowl. And I don't want to call them out necessarily, but what do you know about them other than they're in El Paso and Memphis? They're bowl games. But now the Duke's Mayo Bowl, it's in Charlotte, but they all have similar kind of teams, but one has a Mayo dump.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty fun. And so now the other ones have to, I'm not sure you can lasso the sun, but in El Paso, but I think you could try to find different ways to do something that people will recognize and have fun with.
That's what people say whenever I say, can Iowa average 40 points a game? And they say, well, you can't lasso the sun.
While Scott was talking, I Googled the definition for unsheath, and it's past tense, and it's to draw or pull out a knife, sword, or similar weapon from its sheath or covering. And I think it makes perfect sense to refer to a Pop-Tart that way. All right, let's get to some voicemails real quick, and we'll get to the Jerry Kill P-Gate, too, before we get out of here. Let's start with the voicemail.
This is Derek in Indiana. Am I crazy, or is USC cursed ever since Pete Carroll left? I'm looking at the college football playoff, and Steve Sarkisian is there with Texas back. I'm looking at the New Year's Six Bowls, and I see Lane Kiffin there with Ole Miss in a top 10 finish. Even Ed Orgeron manages to win a national championship at LSU after he leaves. And while Lincoln Riley's defenses were never great at Oklahoma, they weren't this bad with a Heisman caliber quarterback. So what's the deal? What's happened at USC? And is Lincoln Riley going to win a national championship when he goes to his next job?
That's future.
Ever
Dallas
Since
Cowboys
they took
coach, Lincoln Riley,
Reggie Bush's Heisman away, it was cursed. And it wasn't USC. I think that this is the rational thought process here. And I'm very curious, and I know that I've had some discussions with Antonio Morales, our USC beat reporter, about this. But, as you look at the jobs that are in the top 10, maybe even the top 5, in 2004, at the end or the beginning of the end, I don't remember what year Pete left for the NFL, but after their Matt Leinart run, Like
06?
05, 04, perfect. So my timing is perfect. USC was probably considered a top 3 job in America, based on brand and proximity to talent and all of those things. And I wonder now, as the game has shifted dramatically to a national recruiting necessity, and power conferences and the money that's involved in them, if USC is just not a good enough job to be considered what we thought they would be. And I've had to a reckoning about this because I'm going to owe Andy $1,000 at the end of this year, because I still viewed USC as 05 USC when Lincoln Riley took the job. And maybe the game is passing it by a little bit because it's like Steve Sarkisian, I think was always a gifted play caller. But is it possible that he just went to a better job with access to more players and a more relevant logo? I don't know, because Texas also has been down as long as you. I mean, what is your take on this? My biggest question is, are the players in California just overrated or not as good as they used to be for whatever reason? Is it less players are playing? They don't have linemen out there. It's political views, and I'm not very political, but I think more people are less likely to want to play it at a younger age. I don't know what it is, but California players in general, if we did a stat lookup of this, I wonder if they have been as successful as players in Texas or in the South. And if you look at all these other teams that are out there, Ole Miss is in the South, Texas is in Texas and recruiting the South. Ed Orgeron won his national championship in the South. Is there a South versus California discussion that has to be had here?
I think here's my concern with USC, and I'll take a page from Iowa football and I will sort of punt on your question. And my thought is,
you're punting on my question?
It's not, because it's not so much the past as much as I look at USC's future. The job got a lot worse this year, didn't it?
No, I think it got a lot better this year.
Moving to the Big Ten?
Well,
you think
financially,
it's a better job?
I think that everybody in the Big Ten got a better boost for it.
I think that
USC's brand has been hurt by being a part of a team. I think that USC's brand had been hurt by being in a conference that was a secondary thought to major college football. And that's no longer the case anymore. They don't geographically fit, but now they're in one of the two.
And also, but I'll say, but to counter that, Ari, I don't hear a lot of recruits, especially elite players, saying, "Oh, I gotta go to the Big Ten." That's not what they say. They say, "Oh, I gotta go to the SEC where all the legit guys are." So
no, but we're talking about the future, because the Big Ten, I think, is changing that. I think that the Big Ten's. I
win
think
a national title, Ari.
I'm saying being one of the two power conferences will change that.
I think you're mixing money with perception, and also.
But I know, but money means more facilities, more coaches, more recruiting budget, more everything.
The Big Ten's made more money than the SEC for 2 decades, and it hadn't mattered.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
they get their butts kicked. So I think you're wrong about this. I think the job is worse because you can't just rack up Pac-12 titles if you have a competent coach there anymore. It's going to be tough to win the Big Ten. You maybe do it at best 3 times.
The underrated part of this. Yeah.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the underrated part of this is that USC defense has been trash for a long time. Their concepts have been bad, and their attention to detail has been among the worst in the country. And if they could play solid defense, fundamentally sound defense, they would compete for national championships. You just can't do it on only offense. It's fun. We enjoy the hell out of it every week when we're doing our Heisman
guys.
It's like, Caleb Williams is throwing 7 touchdown passes. Yeah, but they still lost.
Guys.
All you have to do is look at Utah. Look at Utah and think USC has better athletes versus that.
Guys, as we are answering this question, Malachi Nelson, the 5-star USC quarterback, has entered the transfer portal.
Okay. I mean, if they're going to be playing Will Howard next year, it's kind of like whatever.
I just think it's very interesting that as we're having this USC discussion, that their future quarterback entered the. Am I nuts? This is crazy.
I mean, we talked to Tony about the vibes from him have not been fantastic. Like in terms of just what you hear out of there. They
Yeah.
had the injury. I mean, if you want to tell me that they would be better off with him than with Will Howard, I'm just going to disagree with you on that.
David, it's not so much about whether or not this guy was going to turn into Caleb. It's about quarterback culture, and we've seen it at Ohio State.
But that's changing.
5-star quarterback from Los Angeles area, going to USC, supposedly becoming the next great thing, going into the portal very quickly into his career. And Will Howard coming in. Like, this is not the way that USC's quarterback position is supposed to be going. It doesn't matter what you think of him. I think that it is a big deal.
Well, if he can't play, it does matter what we think of him, right? Or if you don't think he can be the next guy. And I think if USC believed that he could be the next guy, that he's going to walk in and his upside, that they believe that what they had seen in practice and so far was going to be that great, you're probably not fielding that call from Will Howard. You've probably had frank conversation with Will Howard, and he probably understands we're probably going to need to go somewhere else, right?
I think that if it's a evaluation issue or a thing gone awry issue, that the success that Lincoln Riley has had, who is probably the only coach in college football that has had as much or more success than Ryan Day at the quarterback position, is going through this is a significant program development.
Yeah. But I mean, it's 5-star quarterbacks. They don't hit. I mean, they hit higher when they're being coached by Lincoln Riley than a lot of places, but they're not can't miss.
I asked the question earlier in the show, David. Here's the question.
Mm-hmm.
At Ohio State and at USC and Oklahoma when Lincoln Riley was the coach, no matter what was going wrong, you could always know that your coach was on top of the quarterback position. Whether it be in recruiting or whether it be in development.
Will Howard's good.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying that Will Howard isn't a great player. This is the new plan for USC? This is great. You don't think this is a big? How do you not think this is a big deal? I'm blown away that you don't think it's a big deal.
Because I think it's just as simple as, I don't think it's a quote unquote plan. I think it just seems like maybe they believe they missed on Malachi Nelson. He's not going to be, 5-star recruiting ranking does not mean 5-star potential, right? And maybe they believe, hey, we like Will Howard a little bit more. Next year, he gives us a better chance to win because Lincoln Riley's not on the hot seat. But, buddy, you better win next year or it's going to be a problem.
Will Howard also was losing
shift.
reps in the middle of the season to a true freshman, wasn't he?
He also got hurt.
Very interesting dynamic. Also, Daquan Finn has chosen Baylor.
Now, that's interesting. The marriage with Jake Spavital. I think hiring Jake Spavital was a really good pickup for Dave Aranda there. And that, I don't love Daquan Finn's arm talent. I think he's really productive. I think he's a really great playmaker. But I'm very intrigued. I think that can go very, very well. I think that makes a lot of sense for both sides. I like that pickup.
Yep. Scott, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just got really excited. Whenever 5-star quarterbacks go into the portal, it happens. Okay, we got one more question, and then we're going to do P-Gate. This is going long. Let's go to the next question, guys.
This is Tommy from Elgin again. I went too long. So I don't think you have to talk about this with the Charlie Baker NIL proposition, which won't probably put in effect. But if it did with that current system of rules where the colleges hold NIL, could that just be where Oregon then just wins everything because Nike just bankrolls, like all of their sports, but football especially, where they can just have every single player has a Nike shoe and apparel deal, and they can just give everyone all of the money. Is that something that would be good, or am I just completely off base on where if you could have schools owning their own NIL deals and a school like Oregon where they basically Nike, would it just be like the high school basketball AU circuit where just you start to get brands owning them as opposed to the schools owning them? Let me know your thoughts, sir. Thanks. Bye.
Question in response to this. If Phil Knight decided we're going to give $500,000 to every Oregon scholarship player that comes here for a Nike NIL deal, couldn't he already do that?
Sort of.
What, just take a picture of them and put them in a catalog as models for Nike and pay them money and compensate them for their image. I mean, I think that I think that is an interesting question, but I also thought that the beginning of NIL, you would see billionaire corporation owners who are fans of teams doing this already, and we haven't seen it. And I think the reason why is because I don't know if publicly traded companies can be in a position where their every dollar and cent is scrutinized on a quarterly earnings report that investors are looking at. I don't know how it works, but and here I see Nike doesn't have unlimited money. They sure don't, but they absolutely could pay $85 million a year if they wanted to give $1 million to everybody on the team. For signing with Oregon, you're automatically a Nike athlete who makes $1 million. They could do that, right? If he was obsessed.
I mean, that's a bad investment. I think here's what we're gonna have to reshape as we.
Would it be a bad investment if Phil Knight said
$85 million a year for your roster?
No. I know, but I'm saying would it work though? Wouldn't it work?
No, because that doesn't make sense. That's not how rosters work, right? There's no point in paying $1 million for the backup left tackle that was a 3-star versus Bo Nix. Well, here's your $1 million too.
What if Phil Knight said, if you're a 5-star prospect, I'll give you $1 million to sign with us? We want 5. We're starting a new shoe line.
I mean, that's not enough in the current market. Here's what we're gonna have to figure out, Ari.
Phil Knight can pay whatever he needs to pay. You're not focusing on the point. Focus on the point.
But
if Phil Knight decided he wanted to make Oregon, so let's just do Tim Cook. They've got even more money than Nike. Let's just do Auburn then. Tim Cook is a rabid Auburn fan, and Apple, I think, is the largest company on the face of the earth, and he makes buku dollars. Every single person who signs with Auburn as a top 100 player is an automatic Apple athlete who gets a pair of these headphones, and you wear them on the bus and to the games. And in order to do that, we'll give you X number of dollars that outpays whatever anybody else is paying you to come to Auburn. Would that be a successful plan to make that team an elite level national title contender? That's the question.
No, I think we've already seen that it's not going to happen. So let's not even because like you said, Ari, if it could happen, it would have already happened. The powers that be, the business owners that be, have already decided we're not going to do this. But what I think you're going to do in the new era is what's going to happen is you're going to have the big time players who do command a lot of money. And I think we're going to, in whatever the new model of college sports look like, we're going to do away with this stupid pretend NIL. Okay. It's going to get a lot more explicit, whether it's a trust fund like Charlie Baker threw out, or whether it is employment agreements, whatever. Okay. You're going to have everybody getting a bottom level paycheck, like a baseline check of whatever that is. It's going to be pretty high at the great places, probably well into the 6 figures. And then the big players are going to get a lot more. And then, if you have a big year, maybe you renegotiate. We'll see kind of what that looks like in terms of an escalator scale. But you're going to see this go away from spending a ton of money on recruiting and more on, here's our base level. Here's what everybody gets. And if you succeed here, you're going to make a ton of money. That's what it's going to look like.
I waterboard Dave with investing stuff all the time to his text messages. I'm going to give you a trivia question. You might know the answer to this.
Okay.
I know the answer to this because I am an Apple shareholder. But what is Apple's market cap as a company? Do you know what it is?
I don't know.
Guess.
They don't have one. I'm going to guess they don't have one.
No. What's the company worth?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea.
I just want you to guess.
$10 billion.
3.07 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
There is no amount of money that company could not do to make Auburn elite if they decided to do it. And I know that there's a board and investors and all these things. It's not just Tim Cook's decision to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that people realize how valuable some of these companies are and how little it would be. It would be a drop in the bucket for Apple to do that if they wanted to. It wouldn't even impact them.
But it would, because we live in an era where businesses all have to have limitless, endless growth. And you're undercutting that, and you're not going to make that money back. If you could do it, you already would have done it.
If you took $100 million out of their earnings reports, if they wouldn't even,
they would, Ari. Trust me, they would.
No, I'm saying it is. If it was a company directive and they decided to do it, it is a very small percentage of what makes Apple Apple. He doesn't own Apple. I understand that, but I'm saying if a company decided to get involved, Phil Knight's the founder. It's a little bit different at Nike than it is at Apple.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen Office Space too many times to not think that in a bizarro world that this could happen. Okay. It's an interesting discussion point though, and it hasn't happened, so it probably won't. And Scott, if you have something to add, this is your time.
Yeah, I think it's an incredible waste of money. And I think those companies got rich by not doing that. I don't know how this is going to shake out when it comes to NIL, because you've got certain people who deserve a lot of money, but I don't think you're going to just across the board give everybody the same amount. Everybody gets $1 million because, as David said, there's going to be the third team left tackle who, and does he deserve $1 million? I mean, it's going to be pretty capitalistic. And I know like some NIL or collectives go with kind of a socialistic part and then a capitalistic part, which the socialistic is, hey, everybody goes to this school and reads books to kids. They all get the same amount. And then there's another part where it's like, hey, you get what you're worth, and I think it's going to be market price. It's going to be market value, so that's kind of what I think is going to happen in the future.
It's like you think $100 million
very
is this huge
unstable.
Amount of money. Apple brought in $90 billion of quarterly revenue this past year. Mm-hmm. Like the amount of money that we're talking about here is banana land.
Yeah, but it has to be $92 billion next year, Ari. And if you take out $150 million of that to go pay kids, then that makes it harder. I don't disagree with you, but that's just not how these businesses operate. And if it was gonna happen, it would already happen. So there you
go. Apple spends $10 billion a year on advertising. Just so you know, like in terms of like budgeting, like that is nothing. I'm just trying to make the point that this
isn't advertising though. That's not advertising.
I mean, I don't know if Malachi.
No,
Nelson
it's not. Listen. Let's not. You're getting muddled into NIL as de facto.
I'm just saying if a company that was worth this much money decided to do it, if it could be effective. But again, it's not happening. Okay, let's go to Jerry Kill and P-Gate.
Our guy.
Catherine, you're about to find out what P-Gate is. It's not P, it's capital P, it's P-E-E. P-Gate. Mm-hmm. Urine Gate. Okay.
So do we want me to run down where we're at with this, Ari?
I wasn't sure if we had the Jerry Kill clip of the rant,
well,
but you can
I can run down what happened to set up the clip. Okay, I'll run down what happened and then I'll cue our producer for the clip. So at some point this summer, New Mexico State quarterback Diego Pavia urinated on New Mexico's indoor facility on the logo.
Urinated.
Yes. He did. Yes. He did what DK Metcalf and Elijah Moore could only pantomime. He went all the way, right? So this happened. And then after New Mexico State beat New Mexico this year, I'm not sure what happened. It feels a little bit like the Bo Pelini held on to the audio of him ripping the fans, and then after a bad loss, they dropped it. I'm not sure where this photo was, but after they beat New Mexico, this photo surfaced of him peeing on the logo, and obviously it caused an uproar in the rivalry. Well, college football, consistently a small world. New Mexico State goes to the New Mexico Bowl this week, and there seemed to be some sort of dust-up or some sort of disagreement over New Mexico State's use of the urine-soaked practice field. Urine-stained practice field.
It stained it? What kind of pee is this guy throwing out there?
Have you seen Diego Pavia play? You're telling me that man doesn't have a powerful stream?
No, I'm not saying he doesn't have a powerful stream. I'm wondering more about the hue of the stream than I am the power of it.
Either way.
Urine doesn't stain anything that isn't white carpet.
It was like
He changed the face of
it's
New
like
Mexico
Rabdo or
forever.
something.
Yeah, either way. So anyway, there seemed to be some disagreement over the use of the practice facility, but as we understand it, based on some Colin Deaver was on the scene. New Mexico State did use New Mexico's facility, as did their opponent in the game, Fresno State, this week. So I'm unsure exactly why Jerry Kill was mad. I guess just that they had to push on this, and then Jerry Kill took the mic after the game, where New Mexico State got their butts kicked, and had this to say.
By gosh, I'm going to get off my damn mind because I hadn't said anything about it. We discipline the young man. He doesn't get to do any interviews and stuff like that. If you want to take a toothbrush and clean toilets all the time, that ain't a lot of fun. And do community service. Well, guess what? I hope the AD here gets the same damn discipline with the people around this state that Diego got, because he deserves it. And it don't bother me a damn bit. When he don't let us want to practice in the indoor facility, when he don't want us to do this and do that, that's chicken shit. And I don't care. That's my opinion. I get in trouble. I don't give a shit either. Because I can go down, and I can go down to Mexico tomorrow, drink margaritas, and let you all enjoy your life, because I'll be enjoying mine. But I got class. I've had class my whole life. And you can ask the college football profession. I've had class. Never been treated like that. And guess what? When that incident happened, I didn't know about it for 2 months. And we beat them right here. Then they tell me after the game, take that to the bank. And he better be disciplined.
So I don't think Eddie Nunez is going to be disciplined by the state or anyone, just for the record.
You don't think we can get a senator involved in this? Or
let's hope. But shout out to Jerry Kill. Listen, I love a good promo. Let's get Jerry Kill in the mix for some WWE action. I'm unsure of why he was so angry if they did use the facility, but all of this could have been avoided if someone else had used the facility. So, it's all good.
Jerry's been feisty over the years. He may not come across that way, but when it comes to PJ Fleck, he hates. Yeah, he's left voicemails on PJ Fleck's phone, screaming at him, and so over the years, that's not exactly a surprise that he gets mad over things like this. But this is I don't know. I think it's pretty damn serious when the quarterback goes to an in-state rival, and they're in different leagues. One's got a higher profile than the other, at least league-wise, and pisses all over the practice facility. I can't imagine that if Rocco Beck did that in Iowa City, that it would go over real well. So, take your pick on any other rival. I mean, I guess I could see it happening definitely in Michigan, that for sure. So, I don't know what's going on with Jerry, but it doesn't sound like he's got much to lean on.
I love this. I love this controversy. This is one of my favorite. This is not Connor Stallion's vacuum salesman level of college football comedy, but it's up there. And and Jerry Kill channeling his LeBron James, like, you guys can go back to your life, and I'm going to go to Mexico and drink margaritas. Incredible. Like, listen, there are some times that rivalries go too far. Like, somebody mentioned Bama Auburn. Like, obviously the tree killing, like, some elements of that are funny, but a lot of it is really not funny at all. This is pretty funny to me. I'm sorry. This is hilarious. At the end of the day, like, the pea's gonna dry. People are gonna move on.
You said it stained, though.
I'm sure it did at some level.
And Catherine brought it up, but Tom Herman's pee chart, you are a bad man if your pee is brown.
It's true. But I think there is a level of hilarity that, like, every time a receiver makes a diving catch on that logo and the rubber pellets spray up and some of them get in your helmet, you're thinking about Diego Pavia's pee. So for that level, I thank you that P-Gate existed. I was laughing about this for like an hour last night. This controversy is awesome, and it's one of the things that I love about college football, because it's a regional sport built around people that hate each other and live in close proximity, and we should keep these rivalries going. That's my promo. Thank you.
Thank you guys for listening to the latest edition of Until Saturday 2014 playoff Iowa offensive coordinator and P-Gate. Much more. Who said it's the off season or winding down to the off season when you have an hour and a half episode? Cam, I read this, our producer Cam, I read our rundown here, and if you thought we were going to keep this to an hour, that's on you. I don't think there was any chance we were able to do that. I think that we could have tightened it up a little bit, but I hope we had some fun. Be sure to follow the podcast on Apple, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and please support the show by dropping a 5-star review. Also subscribe to the Until Saturday YouTube channel, interact with the page, share it, like it, all the things, comment. Anything that you can do to help the continued growth of the show on both platforms would be greatly appreciated. And if you want to watch it or listen to it in a different way, the links to the podcast and the YouTube channel can be found on the show's description. The Sunday Sound Off series will continue on into the off season, so be sure to continue calling 316-462-9852. Again, that is 316-462-9852 to leave your voicemails and text your thoughts in. We will be using them. And of course, sign up for the Until Saturday newsletter, where you'll get your daily fill of college football news right to your email inbox. And all of the links will be found in the show's description. For Scott Dochterman's Internet, Scott Dochterman, Dave Ubben, I'm Ari Wasserman. Thank you so much for listening to the latest edition of Until Saturday.